Hey everybody, Scott Stevens here with a look at some weather. Trying to a little different orientation on this mic thing so I don't feel like I'm completely overwhelmed by it sitting right in front of me. So we'll see how this works. It's been quite a day. We've had an incredible Sally with torrential rainfalls. We've got some of those totals. Some of those damage numbers have come on in as we watch her now begin to scoot towards the northeast. She's been over land for the better part of a day and a half now. The friction is coming on in, and looking at it from space and the visible imagery, you can begin to see where some of the geoengineering potentially has been happening with it, and we'll point that out when we get to the visible shot of that. It's really kind of striking, and striking. I'll just leave it at that. Otherwise, we've got another tropical storm taking shape in the Mediterranean of all things, so it's called a metacane. Bet you hadn't heard that one. Nonetheless, they're already on the letter C if there is a continuity and if they follow the states in their naming and that particular process. So let's come over here and we'll just start with the sun because these show up in, honestly, no particular order. If you like them, it probably is relevant to the age of the relevant tweet. But from NASA's Sun and Space, scientists announced this week that the sun has entered a new cycle. Researchers using the number of different observations techniques and models to predict how the sun will behave through the next activity cycle. The big thing when those of us that are, say, maybe climate contrarians are those exactly those cosmic rays. And as those come out of the sun, they have had and measured, and numerous scientific papers have been published on this low cloud cover. That's what shows up is low cloud cover. Funny that is not even a variable inside the long-term climate models. That delta, that opportunity, that thing is not included. So that's something we're going to have some talks on, another perspective as we move into next week, because that is so important. Have you ever noticed just how much cooler it stays on that day where that low cloud deck just doesn't clear out? Yeah, you too, huh? So meanwhile, a rare tropical cyclone is formed in the Mediterranean Sea, likely packing winds near 100 kilometers with a better part of 60 miles an hour. So a tropical storm, not quite hurricane strength, as is measured out in the open oceans. It'll impact Greece tonight and Friday with strong winds and heavy rains. I was kind of hoping that we'd have an animation here, but that is not the case. We just can see the wrap up and certainly taking the shapes. As a guy that likes to look at things from another perspective, it's curious to see kind of these straight lines and these odd hole punches on here, all kind of in a squarish, right angle-y thing. So that just lets me know that there's another agenda. There's something else going on in here. So this should verify as the fifth consecutive year a tropical entity has dumped 30 inches of rain somewhere. And Matt Lanza is saying that that's remarkable. Sally was the fourth hurricane to strike the U.S. in 2020, the eighth tropical cyclone. Some key figures here as it came ashore: peak winds to 123 miles an hour at Orange Beach, Alabama, up to 30 inches of rain in the rainfall panhandle. And we looked at some of those totals via some of the consumer grade weather observations that you and I can go out, spend $100-$150 on, and then post. Install in your yard, clear of trees, clear of any buildings, and then report out to the rest of the world. It's just weather underground. It's a system that now IBM runs it, but it's very, very useful and very beneficial for those of us looking for more real-time data that you just can't get from the regular let's just say National Weather Service or even the cooperative weather sites. They only report at best once an hour. These guys are updating every minute or every 5 minutes. So there was a reported 6-foot surge in Pensacola, still over 500,000 people without power in Florida and Alabama. So that's a substantial number. Come in here. That's going to open up a whole other page. I should have known better. But it is that western panhandle of Florida that was most greatly impacted by the rainfall and, of course, the storm surge. Yikes, says Ben Knoll, the ECMWF, for early next week. And the American models are in line with this solution now as well. So I'm saying yikes. Which one feature? And I see two. This guy down here, Texas, and the GFS has it wandering along the Texas coast next week, maybe even beginning in the weekend. We'll look at it in a moment because I just saw it. It just has completely arrived. And then this dragging down a whole lot of cold air through New England. So there's two yahoos here and here. And in fact, if we, in Met school, you would have to go find the front, and we would just draw the front right on through this pressure line. and it links right back on in through here, and then the strong high pressure sitting across the southern Appalachians, and then all of this cool and beautiful, but at both ends we have a fairly intense cyclone. So that's going to be festive when we get to that particular day. What is that? Tuesday. So next Tuesday, Monday night, Tuesday. And then here's the two different storms. Hannah making its landfall well south of Corpus, just north of the Mexican border. Isaias, Wilmington, North Carolina, and then Laura, Cameron, and Lake Charles, Louisiana area, and then Sally in the far western Florida Panhandle. So all with their substantial eye walls, all with their damage, and so forth and so on. All right, the 1991 eruption in Mount Pinatubo. I was working in Tulsa at the time when this baby happened, and the global warming was a thing. We just had would just have the Rio de Janeiro climate summit, as we had to get a hold on this climate warming. Then what we realized, or we were very clearly shown, is that this kind of an eruption, for nearly 3 years afterwards, shaved a full degree off the entire planet's temperature. One single event down in those latitudes, but nevertheless, enough aerosols were ejected into the atmosphere that it kind of took the edge off the heating, if you will, for a while. All right, Three Gorges Dam, the world's largest, may be in danger of breaching, and there's a couple of stories here. The rains have not ended. They're not even close to ending. You would think would be towards the end of the monsoon season, but that just isn't the case, as we've seen in other places. All right, National Weather Service in Missoula this afternoon goes west, clearly shows another thick swath of wildfire smoke extending northeast from Nevada into Washington, and then across Montana, where Mark Hake, I actually went to school with that guy in Kansas a long time ago. He's up in Missoula, Montana, so that's why he's reporting this. So they're dealing with that smoke from that great distance. Speaking of smoke, the National Interagency Fire Center, we have dealing with actually resulting in two large new fires from light initial attack. These fires were contained, one in California, two in Washington. The number of wildland fires is now below the 10-year average. Acreage burned by large wildfire acres has surpassed the 10-year average. We are at two new ones, three contained. Fires under active, acreage under active fires right now, just shy of 4 million, with 79 that are uncontrolled. Total acreage burned on the year, still just shy of 7 million. All right, had some improvement in the drought across the west, mainly in the plains of Colorado, where enough of that rain and snow wasn't enough to really improve, but it halted the degradation. Kansas, Oklahoma, good portions of Texas, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, and Wisconsin getting some improvement. Some of the rains that came ashore from Isaias, and then that deep winter-like low that rolled through the Mountain West last week. But one story was just the record heat that was just incredible across the West. The list is at droughtmonitor.unl, that's University of Nebraska-Lincoln.edu, and then some of the record highs that have occurred this month across the West. And then a little bit closer to home for me was that Alamosa ended up with some 13.6 inches of snow from September 8th through 10th, breaking a monthly record originally set when 10 inches fell on September 27 and 28, 1936. Interesting, 1936 also being the apex of previous heat and drought, and that allowed for a record snowfall in the West. All right, this is, just because we've talked about drought, this is the 16-day precip anomaly across the states in Canada. And when we go into the browns, we're in a deficit, and into the reds, we're in a bit of a deeper deficit. White would be neutral. We get the amount of rain that we typically would this time of year. And then in the greens and blues, we're seeing a bit of a surplus. So outside of the immediate Gulf coastal areas, and then through the southern Appalachians and the Piedmont of North Carolina, and just the far northwestern Cascadia region, almost everyone else, maybe a few higher terrain locations in the Rockies, at or below normal precip. So this is not necessarily good news. Now, this is this morning's run. I'm going to see if the latest one is in, because it was coming in as we went to air, and it doesn't look like it's in and has run the completed 16 hours or 16 days worth of runs yet. So no, that's not in just yet. Otherwise, it would pop up for us. And what that model was showing us was the opportunity of a low cutting off, much like the winter low did last week, but that would be next week, and then into the week after, into the Mountain West. So that's the upside. All right, extremes, record highs. A little bit today in the west, American Falls, down Idaho, and then some of the far lower Colorado River Valley, and then almost nothing through the remainder of the week. But more interestingly is the cool, fresh, chilly Canadian air dropping in from the north on Saturday and Sunday with some widespread record low temperatures, record low high temperatures across the west. Those are my two dogs. That's obviously Comet, who has found something that he finds interesting outside. Dangerous Metacane Casilda, forecast to strike western Greece, as we talked about. And then here's the record high, 114, 13 miles east and southeast of Mecca, California, and also Octillo Wells, 22, 4 miles northwest of Grand Lake, Colorado, the coldest spot. And the Atlantic remains active. I don't see anything that's going to change that anytime soon. And as I mentioned in the description, September 10. Before that is half the season. After September is the remainder of the season. And here we are 7 days after the peak, and we have all of this activity out in the Atlantic. So something is not done, and this is the one. This one deep in the Bay of Campeche that I think is going to be fascinating, and they're anticipating a formation chance through the 5 days, the bottom line of this description, at high at 90%. So we're going to be looking at this area probably through the weekend and through next week. The other thing is Teddy, full-blown hurricane, standing way out here, gets entrained in the same storm system that will light up this area. So we're going to watch that kind of closely. And of course, this page is working. Look at this right here, right here, right here. And then look at the clouds just shooting out from this, literally driven. It's like there's a hose of water. It's just spraying that water. So there's some action that is keeping this part of the low from progressing, or even it's like if you're rowing on one side of a boat and then you kind of steer this way because you got that forward momentum on this backside of what was Sally. So disintegrating. So this is kind of fascinating, at least from a meteorology point of view. Elsewhere, the big story continues to be the smoke coast to coast, straight up coast to coast, from New England across the Midwest into the northern Rockies. And now that we've got a low approaching the west, we're getting some stronger south winds. Let's zoom in here just a little bit more. And then during the nighttime hours, the black spots are where we have fires. That's where the heat is, and the infrared imagery is beginning to pick that up. So we can see those fire locations. We can see them grow. We can see them shrink at night. But the northern Rockies just inundated by the smoke. The central Rockies also, but it's far, far thicker off to the north. All right, let's pop into Atlanta, just because there's quite a population center there. And I got to recycle these so I can then animate the map. Then 3, 4, 5 inches in and around the metro area. So really kind of a good soaking rain. As Sally rolled through there, 6.5, 5.03, 4.48, 3.22, 4.6. So Atlanta really got a soaking. And as we catch up with where she is presently, 3, 4 inches. So these lakes getting a nice pulse of fresh rainwater, bringing the creeks up nice and high, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches. And now Spartanburg, South Carolina, 2.5 inches. And so just a good soaking rain even into Asheville, North Carolina, 2+ inches. So really some good rains in that part of the country as Sally continues to race to the northeast. And with that, under that low cloud cover, 60s, 70s, and even in the wake, we still haven't been able to clear 70 degrees because the clouds are still so thick on the backside of it. 90s out west, even in southern Idaho, still at this late month, in this late week in September, as we pass the midpoint of September, holding on to the lower 90s. And this, after there's one little town here in eastern Idaho that before the snow last week topped out at 103 degrees. 3 days later, on that next morning, they woke up to 16. That's an incredible swing. And that area in Jefferson County is known for 50, 55, 60-degree swings on just a normal day's reading. But to go from 103 plus down to 16 is just extreme. And it's just would end the growing season when you go to 16. You can't cover it and protect it. It just isn't possible. All right, cool high pressures across the middle part of Canada. And they've muscled south, and you can see these little wind veins as they're driving the cooler, drier air, the relief from the summertime heat deep down. And we've even got 2 frontal boundaries, one through the Volunteer State and then another one just north of the Ohio River Valley. And then Sally still kind of churning, but her fate is sealed. Her fate is sealed as she delivers some rain to the northeast. One place that is unusually dry is New England, with crop, let's just say pasture and cropland is short to very short of available moisture. Through Massachusetts, Rhode Island in a severe drought, Connecticut with rangelands in poor to very poor condition. So much of New England very, very dry this summer. In fact, I think Caribou, Maine had only had less than a tenth of an inch so far through this entire month, and just 3% of normal. So it's been dry. A place that we're beginning to see some rains now beginning to take shape in and around South Texas, where drought has always seemed just next week. It's just we're either just coming out of it or just going into it. So these rains in Texas always welcome. Not always, but right now they're very welcome. All right, we got the latest model spooled up here for you. This is the low that's approaching the west coast. This is Teddy out in the Atlantic, and then this little disturbance right here is what is remaining of Sally, and then this is allowing for just this little curvature right here is enough to allow those rains to spark up in Texas. But what we're watching is this, which will bring in maybe a few showers along the coastal areas, but not much more than fresh air. And if you're stuck inside and the mask isn't just really working, then this fresh air is welcome. But then we talked about this other low, well, right there, just kind of hanging on the South Texas coast. So as we move through next week, we're going to have a lot of eyes, screaming about this little event. I don't know what its name yet is going to be. There's a list, but I just haven't looked at it along that Texas coast. And then the other option is for the next low to curl off and then drop into the west. If this happens, and for the last 2 days, a model will bring it in and we get a little rain into the Mountain West, and then the next two runs, no, the ridge is in place and we get nothing. And this latest one, actually the last two, have shown some precip, an opportunity to bring some cool air and a little bit of relief to the Mountain West. So we'll see if that happens. But one thing I can tell you for sure is that Sally's not the last hurricane that we'll have. Well, there's actually going to be two that'll show up in this Gulf region. One, right around Brownsville, Corpus, tries to come inland, stalls out, and then gets drawn back out to sea, re-strengthens a little bit, and then just comes ashore right down there, right at Houston. So it is. If this happens, this is just mean. That's just mean to the folks down on that Texas coast. And then there's some cool air that tries to come into the Mountain West with maybe some rainfall. Let's look at total precip just because I want to know for myself. And we'll scroll by. We'll probably see, up here 7, 8, 9 inches down here at the bottom. That's what these colors denote. So we'll scroll this forward, get to next week, and then, that whole Texas coast, as if they didn't get harassed enough already. That's 13, 14, 15, 8, 12 inches worth of rain. Look at that, 14, 18, 18.6, 15.5, 10.44, 7. So this is going to be an area that next week, if they haven't already visited Home Depot, if they haven't already got the mops and prepared for the last storm, they're going to be dealing with it again. And this is also good. Good rains in the West Texas Panhandle, 6, 7 inches. Let's just hope it doesn't come all at once, that we can stretch this out over a nice period of time. Maybe even some moisture into the Sierras. That's good. This would really help the Oregon mountains, the Cascades, 4 or 5 inches worth of rain, and even more than that as we move into British Columbia. The mountains of Idaho, we've got some fires down there. One down in the Owyhees, just south of the Burley Rupert area. A half inch of rain would go some distance there. So there's some improvement. We'll see if the models remain attached to this. No guarantees, absolutely no guarantees. And then precip, just because, or this would be snowfall. Let's see. Yes, it's in. And run this out. Yes, play. I'll speed this up so we don't have to sit here and wait for it to paint. Oh, that's the Wind River Range. A little bit of snowfall, and otherwise we're kind of waiting towards the end of next week, and then in the week beyond that. And not lots, but the cooler weather for California was certainly good. Go Comet, Vicky, you're so comical. He's quite the little character. He's got a voice on himself, and he's really enjoying letting us all know when there's a rabbit in the yard or a squirrel or just a car that drives by a little bit slowly. He tells us. So Three Gorges, that would be an event, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it, Donald? That's something that we'll see. They've already seen some cavitation underneath the dam. where there's some silt built up down the Yangtze. And as you know, if you leave your hose sitting over dirt, it creates a hole underneath, and then there's this apron of silt and pebbles out beyond that. But it lifts the whole water level up, and that appears to be what they're enduring and going through right now. So that would be an event that ultimately would put 35 to probably 75, 80 million lives at risk. And then once the sirens would go, where do you go if you're already flooded in, if you're already in a situation that you can't get beyond the roads and so forth? So it's kind of a tenuous situation. Colorado needs some moisture, absolutely. Are any of these other activities in the Atlantic going to make landfall? I think that one that we pointed out a bit ago will just tease that Texas coast. And when we run out of names, Vicky, since we have a V storm out there with the name of Vicky, we'll end up going through the Greek alphabet. And when I first kind of got into talking about unusual weather patterns in 2004 and 5, in 2005, we were at the end of 2005 and in the beginning of 2006. And I believe we're into the seventh or eighth letter of the Greek alphabet to get names for these storms. So we'd gone through the entire regular list and then went alpha, beta, and so forth and so on. So we'll see what happens this year. Pretty much guaranteed we'll get past 2005 just because, hey, it's 2020. Things are biblical. This year it's a little strange. All right, good to see you on there. Holy cow, I can't imagine that would wreck us here where we are so dry and on this mountaintop. That would wreck us. Our streams would be up and we'd have water running through the arroyos, and where people have built homes, they would I don't know how, if they'd be livable. Would be digging sand out of them. It would be really, really rough because we're not prepared to deal with that kind of water where we are here in Colorado. All right, thanks for stopping by. We'll catch you tomorrow. We'll wrap up the week. And check on that Medicane going on in the Mediterranean, hence the name, the Med, and what potential snows may arrive towards the end of the next week in the Mountain West, and assist those firefighters that really can use all of the help that they can get. I'll catch you then. In the meantime, keep looking up.